Hello, we'll get started in a moment. Great, so Tana, let's go ahead and get started.
Um, Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our webinar series today. This is the third installment of our STARTALK programs webinar series. We are going to kick things off really soon. Very excited to have Dr. Rachel Mamiya Hernandez today from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. So I'm going to do just a brief introduction and I will hand things off to Rachel. Really quickly, before I introduce Rachel, I just want to give a quick plug to our next StarTalk program, Georgetown StarTalk C program. This is task-based instruction for learners of Chinese. So if you are a student learning Chinese, you can come to Georgetown in the summer for a week-long camp and learn some Chinese. So if you'd like that, the QR code here has all the information for that. And Meg also added the link in the chat. All right, and briefly, we have with us today Dr. Rachel Mamiya Hernandez from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. She is an assistant faculty specialist in the language technology at the University of Manoa, the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Her research interests include language acquisition and teaching, project-based language learning, online intercultural exchanges, social justice, and instructional design. Please welcome me. Welcome, Dr. Rachel. I will turn things over to you now.
Thank you, everyone. So I will go ahead and share my screen and get started. So today we're going to talk about leveraging universal design for learning to support language learners. And as Tana mentioned, my name is Rachel Mamiya Hernandez. Aloha mai kako, as we say here in Hawaii. I am a language technology specialist at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I work for the Center for Language and Technology, and I also do work for two of the centers that are sort of sister centers of my center, the Language Flagship Technology Innovation Center and the National Foreign Language Resource Center. And prior to that, I taught Spanish and Portuguese languages at the University of Hawaii for 15 years. So today we'll do a little bit of introduction. We'll go over the Universal Design or UDL guidelines and some examples. We're going to look at some tools that we can use to support us as instructors with UDL, and also some wrap up and reflection. So I always like to get to know my audience. If you have the chance, you can scan this QR code, and I will also pop the URL in the chat, or you can go to this URL. And I actually want to get to know a little bit about all of you. So you can scan the code, and I'm going to hop over to those slides. Okay, here we go. Okay, so my first question is, what language or languages do you teach? It looks like we have Korean as one of our STARTALK languages here represented, and then some others that are not here. That's all right. Oh, ESL, Spanish, French. Awesome. And then my next question to you is, how familiar are you with Universal Design for Learning, or what we call UDL? So somewhat familiar, very familiar, perhaps not familiar at all, and that's okay. Awesome. So it looks like there's some level of familiarity. There's some variability here, which is an important concept that we're going to talk about today. Awesome. So I will head back to the presentation. And just take a few seconds right now and think about, what are your own personal learning goals today for this session. So I'll just give you a few seconds to think of that. And now I'm going to share with you my goals for you at the end of this session. I hope that by the end of this session, you are able to recognize the core principles for UDL and identify ways they can be implemented in your classes. I also hope we can collaboratively explore some UDL-aligned tech tools, and also brainstorm, share ideas, and discuss ways in which UDL principles can be integrated into our teaching contexts. So this is a beautiful picture of the island of Kauai. That's the island my grandma is from. She was from. She was from a tiny town called Hanapepe. But this is on the Na Pali coast. And we can see here, these cliffs are amazing. And one reason these cliffs look so amazing is because they are so varied, right? The rains, the wind, the wear on them makes them jagged, makes them varied. And that's an important concept in UDL that Todd Rose points out. There is no average. And really, in life, in nature, variability is the rule and not the exception. So we have to remember, part of what makes the Na Pali coast of Kauai so beautiful is that variability, and part of what makes our learners so wonderful is also their natural variability. So the concept of universal design actually has its roots in architectural design. So Ron Mace, one of sort of the founders of universal design for learning, said universal design is the design of products and environments to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without the need of adaptation or specialized design. So we can see here, right, that design on the left is probably not a great example of design in accessibility. That person on the wheelchair is not going to be helped by the escalators, really. However, if we look at this image on the right, which I believe is a park in Toronto, if I'm not mistaken, we can see the way that the ramp is actually built into the stairs, so that accessibility is kind of naturally built in to the design from the beginning. Another example that is often given when we talk about UDL is the idea of curb cuts. I had never really heard this word, even though English is my native language. So a curb cut is actually the little dip in a sidewalk at the end of a sidewalk, or sometimes you see them in parking lots. And they are often designed intentionally for wheelchair access. However, if we think about curb cuts and what is called the curb cut effect, this design is actually not only useful for people in wheelchairs, but when my kids were little and I used to take them in strollers, right? It was useful for me. It's useful for people who are moving things around. It's useful for cyclists. So we can see sometimes how design intended for one use can make everyone's life better. And really, that's kind of a fundamental concept of universal design. And we'll see how that applies to learning. So the co-founders of CAST, which is the collaborative that works on universal design for learning, says that barriers are in the curriculum and not in the students. So often I think we frame deficiencies as being within our students. However, a lot of times the actual barriers to their learning or to their success are within the way the curriculum is designed itself. So if we take a step back and look at ways we can design the curriculum to be more accessible, we will actually improve outcomes for all students. So when we talk about universal design for learning, we are focusing on three main principles. Whoops, let me go back one. The first is multiple means of engagement. So we want to design for multiple ways that we can engage our learners with the language, with the content. We also want to design for multiple means of representation. So we want to be able to represent language in as many forms that are comprehensible to our learners as possible. And we also want to design for multiple means of action and expression, or perhaps build in ways our students can interact and express themselves through the language and through what we're working on. And these are all actually based on neuroscience and brain science and learning educational psychology. So universal design has taken large bodies of research and kind of come up with these three main principles of designing for multiple means of engagement, designing for multiple means of representation, and designing for multiple means of action and expression. An important concept in universal design for learning is the idea of systemic variability. So Todd Rose says that we've identified dimensions of systemic variability that exist in every learning environment and in every age. So these are differences in the way people receive information, differences in the way they engage with the material, and differences in the way they act upon the material and show what they know. So when we design to encompass those differences, we can really support all learners. So this idea that while there is great variability, there is a systematicity to this variability. So when we look at universal design for learning, whoops, sorry. We're thinking about reducing barriers in the learning environment. We're thinking about increasing learners' cognitive access. And our ultimate goal is to increase overall learner agency. So when we think about language development, we're going to think about some different things like engaging and motivating learners, welcoming their interests and identities, fostering community and belonging, making input comprehensible, which of course we know is really important as language teachers, preparing and supporting language production, and providing feedback and supporting communication. So this comes from Torres and Rao, who have an excellent book on universal design for language learners, which I'll give you the reference to at the end. I also wanted to remind us of sort of the ACTFL proficiency, or sort of the proficiency levels. Now, I know this is not a perfect infographic. However, I think it helps us in really managing our expectations and reminding us what learners can do at different stages, right? Of a novice learner, an intermediate learner, an advanced learner, and kind of thinking of the ways they can move to progress along and up their levels of proficiency. So I remember when I first looked at the ACTFL standards, even though I had a master's degree at the time, they confused me, but seeing an infographic kind of helped me think, okay, so this is what I can expect of a novice learner, and this is kind of what I have to do to push my learners from novice low to novice mid. So that's kind of why I include the infographic, just for us to think about our learners, think about their levels, their abilities, and think about what we need to do and what supports we need to build in to build that proficiency to the next level. I also want us to think about our STARTALK teaching principles, which many of you are probably familiar with. So as we think about universal design for learning, I'm sure you'll see many ways that UDL can support all of these principles, like implementing a standards-based, thematically organized curriculum, the ways it can support you in conducting performance assessments, the ways it can support integrating culture, content, and language, ways also UDL can be used to support target language and providing comprehensible input. Also, the ways it can help facilitate a learner-centered classroom, and the ways it can help you adapt and use age-appropriate, authentic materials. So as you go through and as you listen to me talk, you can think about ways in which UDL can support your STARTALK teaching principles. So you can just take a minute and share your thoughts, or you can even unmute if you want to. What are some barriers that you see to learner engagement in your classes? You can either put it in the chat, or you can say it out loud if you don't.
I think different learning styles. I don't know if I'd call it a barrier, but just different ways of engaging. Maybe some learners don't feel facilitated in like their style or their personality.
Definitely. So, like individual differences and preferences, lack of confidence and motivation. I see that there. I definitely, from my learners, have seen anxiety, and I've seen that as something that's really increased probably in the past 5 years or so, that I've noticed among my learners. And I'm sure there's other things that people are thinking about as well. So, when we design for engagement, we are thinking about the affective networks of the brain, or what we call the why of learning. So really thinking about how learners get engaged. And you can see this sort of graphic organizer that CAST uses, and we think about with that and designing for multiple means of engagement. We want to think about welcoming learners' interests and identities, sustaining effort and persistence, and ways we can design for that, and also ways we can design for that affective, emotional capacity. So sort of keeping all of those things in mind, and I will give you links to this framework where you can explore it in detail, because they do have a lot of detail in the framework online. Another thing that I thought was interesting from a CAST presentation I recently went to was really that there is research that joy builds understanding, and that it helps improve students' social connection. And that actually in many studies has helped that show that they retain information better. So when you build on this affective engagement in your learners, that can actually improve outcomes. So when we design for engagement, we may think of a potential barrier, something like irrelevant content, or there might be a lack of interest on your learners' part. So you want to think of some design strategies like providing students with structured choice. You may want to think of getting to know learners' interests and passions, and also being able to include multiple modalities, right? So not just the written text, but perhaps an audio version or images, etc. One way we can do this in universal design for learning, or one way this is often done, is through what we call choice boards. So choice boards provide learners with different ways to learn content, practice skills, or demonstrate what they've learned. And we can see an example here where students will have a choice of different ways that they can show their knowledge. So perhaps they want to do a multimedia presentation. Maybe they'd rather do a poster or a TED Talk or a podcast. Sometimes you may have students do several of the choices. Maybe you'll make them do 2 out of 6 choices or something like that, or perhaps only 1. When you are creating a choice board, though, you want to think about which standards or can do or content you want to include, right? So always thinking about where you want to go, your backward design. And you also want to think about where you want your students to arrive and really think about including multiple modalities. So perhaps it's not only writing a paper, but maybe they can demonstrate their knowledge in other ways. Perhaps it is through a video recording. Perhaps it is through creating a manga or comic strip or something like that. So there may be multiple avenues for your students to demonstrate um, that can do or that standard or that content or knowledge. I also find this very helpful, and I'm sure many of you have classes that are mixed between heritage language learners and perhaps more traditional non-heritage language learners. And I find it very helpful in supporting different needs for different students, as I know many heritage language learners perhaps have this preference of oral communication, while traditional language learners sometimes have more of a preference for textual communication. And it can allow you to be open to those differences and support different needs. So thinking about interpretive communication, right? The listening, the reading, what are some aspects of interpretive communication that your students struggle with? You can either unmute your mic or you can pop your thoughts in the chat. Engaging with authentic text at beginning levels, definitely. I know for me, with Portuguese, that learners always had a lot of trouble between the way the words were written and the sound, the differences between the written representation and the ways the words sounded, how native speakers use certain grammar in different contexts with pragmatic meanings, definitely. I'm sure that for some languages with StarTalk, you may have different alphabets or different writing systems, which can also, I'm sure, be challenging. So when we are talking about designing for representation, we're really thinking about the recognition networks of the brain, or what we call the what of learning. So how we process and understand input. So when we think about that in terms of universal design for learning, we are thinking about designing options for perception. So opportunities to customize display, multiple ways that students can perceive that information. We're thinking about designing for options for language and symbols, right? So clarifying vocabulary and structures, supporting their understanding, also addressing biases, right? And we're thinking about designing options for building knowledge. So connecting to that prior knowledge, highlighting any patterns. Perhaps a barrier in designing for representation might be limits in the modes of input, right? Perhaps they're only offered a text and some students struggle with decoding that text. You can offer multiple means of representation. You can leverage a lot of tech tools nowadays to help support that content. And you can also chunk content. So it's not an overwhelming amount of content for the learner, but it's broken up into smaller pieces. So it's easier for learners to manage, digest, and comprehend. So in thinking of multiple means of representation, we really want to include multimodal support. So visuals to support text or audio, and audio definitely to support text. We also really want to think about chunking content. So making larger content into little pieces like videos, audio, text content from target language cultures and communities into smaller manageable bites. And we really want to leverage technology by using text to speech, captions, translations, transcripts, and visuals. We can see this example over here from a Chinese instructor, Li Jie-chin. And you can see here, it's a little fuzzy in the photo, but she has pinyin as well as the Chinese characters. She also offers simplified Chinese characters, and she even offers blank spaces for her learners to kind of write out their own understanding of what's going on in the images. And it's hard to see here, but there's actually some buttons here where they can click and access the audio. So we can see here that she's used technology and multimodal support to help her students in their learning using multiple means of representation. When we think about our last area of designing for action and expression, we are thinking about the strategic networks of the brain, or the how of learning. So we're thinking about expressing ideas and demonstrating learning, things like goal setting. And in terms of design choices, when we design for multiple means of action and expression, we are thinking about designing options for interaction, right? We want to vary the methods and honor the ways that learners can respond. We want to also think about designing for expression and communication using multimedia, using multiple tools for construction and composition, building fluencies with graduated support, right? Scaffolding, like we always do in our language classes. And we also want to think of designing options for strategy development, right? For setting meaningful goals and anticipating the challenges and organizing information and resources. So one potential barrier for action and expression, or two potential barriers, might be challenges in speaking or communication. Another one we had mentioned earlier that we had identified was anxiety that a lot of our learners feel when they have to express themselves. So we want to think about varying how students can interact with what they know through multimedia, and to really leverage technology for support. One way we can do this is through graphic organizers. Graphic organizers can be used in many ways. We often use them to comprehend text or multimedia, but we can also use them to scaffold production, right? So you can use a graphic organizer to help your students understand and digest the information, or even prepare themselves for a speaking task or for a writing task. So when you create a graphic organizer, you really want to think about the standards or content you want to include. You want to think about providing a word bank or a phrase bank, or perhaps visual supports. I just saw the chat. Oh yeah. So yeah, definitely. Graphic organizers can be super useful in class, and we can see an example here. I think this is from a Persian video, and you could use it to have students talk about the video or summarize it or compare characters. One thing I wanted to point out is there is a UDL design cycle proposed by Rao and Mio and Torres and Rao. And they talk about starting with identifying the barriers and developing the goals, then developing your assessments, moving on to your methods and materials. Then ideally you would teach the class or teach the lesson. And finally, you would reflect and revise. I often say that I think personally steps 1 and 2 can be inverted. Perhaps you have a can-do or a standard that you need to do for your class, so that's already identified. And then you might go and identify the barriers afterwards. But I just wanted to point this out, that this can be a useful cycle for thinking about a task or activity, or in the broader picture, if you were trying to work UDL throughout your whole curriculum, you can think about that too. So we'll go back to our interaction I would like you to share your thoughts on what are some of the barriers that keep you from implementing UDL in your classes. And you can either scan that QR code. I will also put the link in the chat. Uh-oh, where'd my chat go? Oh, my screen. Okay. Oh, okay. Sorry. So what are some of the barriers that keep you from implementing UDL in your classes? Accessibility, yeah, screenshots that cannot be recognized. That's a great point. Time, support, curricular constraints. As you can see, there are a number of barriers, but it does not surprise me because I have been a teacher and I know that there is never ever enough time. Knowledge and training, lack of resources, indeed. So there are a lot of barriers. However, I do want to say that we don't have to fret because I think there's a lot of ways we can leverage technology to support UDL. And I'm going to share some ways I do it, and then you can share some ways that you think you might do it. So if we're first thinking about a barrier like multiple means of like context irrelevance and interest in text, we can use Magic School, which is a versatile tool, and we can use it to really help with multiple means of engagement, and especially in terms of using authentic videos to create either questions for chunked content. You can even create level texts. So just some different ideas for using Magic School is you could use it to create chunked content for an interpretive task. You could have students identify a video they want to watch in the target language and create questions for it. You could also copy and paste a text passage and use the text leveler, or you can stimulate group work by using the group work generator tool. So I will quickly show Magic School. It's a free tool to use. You can log in and you'll see this. You'll see a bunch of different AI tools. Perhaps if we're thinking of one, I might want to create some questions for a video in the target language. So I just said that I just chose the YouTube video questions. I put my URL, my link in there. I choose the grade level. I'll say 5th grade, and I want multiple choice questions. And I gave it the link, which is a link about a Chinese legend. And it's giving me these questions. But as you see, it's giving me the questions on the video in English. I can just click down here and have it translate the questions to Chinese. And I don't speak Chinese, I will say that. So, check it first to make sure there's no mistakes, but I could copy and paste these questions if they're good and use them in something like Ed Puzzle, or I could just ask my questions out loud as we use them. No, you don't have to pay for those functions on the website. And actually in Magic School too, they actually have a launch to students feature. So you can always create classrooms and post the activities there for your students directly. So that is something you can do with Magic School. Returning to looking at some other tools, and I'll wrap this up really quickly. For a potential barrier if input and listening, you can use Diffit, which is a tool to create graphic organizers and worksheets for certain content. So this is Diffit. And I believe the example I have here is a Russian video on the 3 bears. It's a story. So I can use that link from YouTube and generate, maybe I want it 3rd grade reading level, and of course it's Russian. So let me scroll down and find it. And then in a click, or a few seconds, sometimes it takes a little while, it will generate the resources very quickly. So you see here, it's given me a simplified transcript, a summary, vocabulary words. You can even use these graphic organizers. You do have to sign in, but it's free. It will create graphic organizers using Google Slides for you. So again, super easy. Okay. Lastly, I wanted to show a way you can create choice boards with Padlet. So Padlet will allow you, with the Magic Padlet feature, to create choice boards. All I did was add in a Padlet prompt. And I think I did this one for Arabic teacher, create a choice board on the topic of food. I said use only modern standard Arabic, use simple words and sentences, and make sure that the examples are culturally appropriate. Again, I'm not an Arabic speaker, but I looked over it. It seemed pretty good. I looked and translated it too. And again, this is a matter of seconds that it took to create this choice board for me. So this is something, of course, I could go back and modify and change if I wanted to. But again, using generative AI in this way is a real time saver. Okay, I will get back to the presentation to wrap things up. So lastly, I'd like you to go back to our AHA slides. It's the same link that's in the chat, or you can scan here. And you can think about what are some ways you might integrate UDL principles into your classes, and what are some tech tools that you think might be useful to support your learners. So I'll give you a few seconds to hop on over to that page and add your ideas. And also, for those of you viewing it afterwards, I will make sure to leave this open so you can also add ideas. More graphic organizers. Yeah, definitely. They can be really useful. I will also, I believe ACFL has some graphic organizer templates that I will add to the presentation in the links that can be useful as well. Multimodal content, definitely. And I think especially for the generation of learners we are working with now, they really have grown up in a world where a multimodal world. So I think to engage them and to really support them, we need to really focus on multimodality, definitely. Choice and assignments, definitely. Yeah. Voice and choice for learners is really important to give them that agency in what they are learning. And yeah, using principles to differentiate, leveraging tools like Magic School and Diffit. Those are all awesome ideas. Multiple means of representation and expression, options for tasks and tools. Definitely great suggestions. I will just head back to my slides to make sure I have enough time to wrap things up. So I really want you to not feel like an overworked short order chef when you think of UDL, right? Don't feel like you need to make a specialized curriculum for each and every student. That would be overwhelming. But I do want you to think, and if you've ever been to Brazil, where I spent a lot of time in college and afterwards, I want you to think of what we call the restaurante self-service or restaurante ao quilo, right? The self-service or kilo restaurants where it's not a buffet. You don't pay one price and eat everything. You just take what you need and then you pay for that. So the kilo place is great, and they have salads, they have vegetarian option. Of course, it's Brazil, so they have rice and beans, they have different meats. So it really can cater to a lot of different needs. So think about, UDL more as anticipating barriers, anticipating the needs of different learners, and trying to build in systemic supports. So really quickly, we don't have that many people here today. You can just either unmute yourself or put it in the chat. Just one word reflection from today's workshop or today's session. You can just choose one word and think about why you chose that word. Staircase. Awesome, Meg. Why did you choose staircase?
I think that visual representation of UDL is really impactful for me when I think about building design from the very beginning. So that I'll think about that when I think about designing my own curriculum.
Awesome. Yeah, building in for that variability. Buffet. Yeah. It's almost lunchtime here, so I like that one. Ahian, why did you choose that one?
So universal design is like teachers can prepare kind of options, so students should be able to choose the way they want to choose. For example, in buffet, there are different foods, and then the customers choose just whatever they want, whatever they crave for. Likewise, in class, students should have the options to choose the tools, the way they express, and then the tools they can express their ideas or the various things.
Yeah, definitely. So having that choice, having that different options for expression. Anyone else want to add in a word? I think my word is probably variability. There's just so much variability, even between us as a small group of language teachers, right, in what our learners need, in our backgrounds, and in our needs. So I think if we just recognize and honor that variability and really think about ways in which we can help make our learning environments more inclusive, that's really the key. So just a few final thoughts. Embrace variability. Remember that it's the norm and not the exception. And when we build in flexibility for certain learners, we're really improving the conditions for all of our learners. I would also say start small by adapting a few tasks or assignments. Don't feel like you need to do everything all at once or redo your whole curriculum. I would say use technology to expand opportunities, use generative AI and other technology to expand and not restrict opportunities. And also to remember that nothing can replace you. You need to cultivate your relationship with your students, use intentional design to help you create deeper, more meaningful learning experiences. And these are some great resources. CAST has UDL guidelines available in several languages, Arabic, Chinese, and Russian, in addition to English, as well as Spanish and some others. There's also the UDL for World Languages podcast from the National Foreign Language Resource Center, and another useful podcast, UDL in 15 minutes. Like I mentioned, there's also the UDL for Language Learners book from CAST, which is a really great resource. And thank you, mahalo. And I open it up for questions. You can access these slides at that URL. I will stop sharing and also put that URL in the chat.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel. So many good things to think about. We do have time for maybe one question before we wrap up. So if anyone has a question, feel free to unmute yourself or drop that in the chat.
Can you give us just one example, like the universal design actually would be in the class. So the actual example would be really helpful for us.
I couldn't hear your question, Aha. I don't know why my audio is a little bit weird. Could you either
Oh,
type
okay.
it in the
Yep.
chat or repeat it? Can you hear
Sure,
me
yeah,
okay?
do you hear me? Or still there's an issue? Then I'll type in.
I think that's better, at least for me. I couldn't hear you before either, Ihan. Yeah.
Then I'll type in now.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Mhm. Wait for Ihan's question. So I'll read this out loud. Can you give us an example of an activity? What lesson was it? What activity you used? What context was it?
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of different ways you could do it, but for instance, if you wanted to give learners a choice, for example, like they have to, I don't know, study about some cultural topic, for instance, in your class, and then you want to give them a choice. Perhaps they could write a blog post about it. Maybe they could record a video of themselves. They also might be able to create a comic strip based on what they learned or what they understood from either the reading or the video of the cultural topic. So sort of giving them those different ways that they could express themselves and express that same sort of knowledge that you're trying to ascertain from your students, or that same goal. That could be an example. Another example might be something simple like if you're using a video from the target language culture, having the transcript available for that video, having even a translation of that video transcript available in English could help some learners. Now, it may be something you don't want to use in your class if you're really trying to focus on the target language, but it may be something that you can allow your learners to access outside of class to support their understanding of the content or preview. Maybe it's something they could do before. So there's lots of different ways and sort of different levels that you could take UDL to. So in terms of building in simple means of accessibility like transcription, captions, audio. Some students prefer listening to something than actually reading it. Those can all be considered ways you can incorporate UDL. You can also do things like choice boards. You can incorporate using graphic organizers, not just for, reading or writing. You can also use graphic organizers to support learners in interpersonal communication or in presentational communication.
Good.
Oh, I think you're muted.
Yeah, thank you.
Then,
I think that's all the time we have for questions. So with that,
I know, I'm sorry, the time is, I went a little long.
that was fantastic. So thank you again, and thank you all for coming today. Have a great morning, afternoon for Rachel, evening for many of us. Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.